the chains of immortality. Pilatus leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as the grainy black and white image of Sage flickered across the surveillance screen. Her movements, fluid and precise, were a dance of defiance, a silent rebellion that echoed louder than words. The dim glow of the monitor bathed his angular features in a pale, unholy light, casting deep shadows that stressed the centuries of cruelty carved into his face. Millennia had sharpened his instincts, honed his patience, and sculpted him into a master manipulator. He had adapted to the changing world, bending it to his will, while many of his progeny fumbled in the dark, lost in the puzzle of modernity. Technology, once a novelty, extended his power, an invisible hand that allowed him to reach across vast distances and tighten his grip on his domain. And yet, the sight of her stirred something ancient, something dangerous, a hunger deeper than the craving for blood, more potent than the lust for domination. It was maddening. She was merely a woman, fragile, fleeting, and breakable, and yet she refused to yield.
Remarkable,
he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, the word laced with a twisted reverence. A cold draft slithered through the chamber, rustling the edges of ancient tapestries that hung like forgotten memories on the stone walls. The scent of aged parchment and the decaying echoes of history filled the air, a familiar balm that usually calmed him, but not tonight. Tonight, the aroma mingled with the iron tang of his own impatience, a bitter taste that curled on his tongue as he watched her pace the confines of her prison.
Sage Steel.
Her name was a curse and a prayer, a thorn that embedded itself deeper with every glance. Her resilience was an affront to his supremacy, a flame that refused to be extinguished. Every deliberate movement, every flick of her wrist or shift of her gaze defied the very order he had built. And still, he admired her enough to want to break her. Pilatus's fingers ghosted along the edge of the monitor, the cool plastic casing a stark contrast to the heat simmering within him. His touch was gentle, almost reverent, as though he could feel her through the screen. But his eyes told a different story, dark, hungry, and brimming with an unholy promise. She would kneel, not because he demanded it, not because he was Pilatus, the blood monarch, but because she would have no choice. His soul, what little remained of it, yearned to unravel her, to watch as her strength crumbled under the unbearable weight of eternity, to strip her bare of her mortal resolve until only submission remained.
You'll yield,
he whispered to the empty room, his voice a caress of shadow and steel, as if the walls themselves could bear witness to his oath. A predator's smile ghosted across his lips, and when she broke, he would savor every fractured piece. The heavy door groaned open, its ancient hinges protesting as Sage stepped into the chamber. The flickering torchlight danced along the blood-red carpet, muffling her footsteps, but doing nothing to soften the weight of her presence. The air was thick, charged with something raw and primal. It was not fear that hung between them, but a tension so taut that it felt as though the very stones of the cathedral held their breath. Pilatus did not rise. He remained seated, His silhouette, a carved monolith upon the throne-like chair. His posture, a languid pose. But his eyes devoured her.
Sage.
Her name rolled off his tongue like a lover's caress, but there was steel beneath the velvet.
I've been thinking about gifts.
Her expression didn't change, but the slightest flicker of wariness rippled in her emerald gaze.
Really?
The word was a dagger, sharp and pointed, laced with disdain and boredom.
Immortality.
Pilates's voice was a dark lullaby, each syllable laced with promise and peril.
The ultimate gift one can bestow.
His eyes tracked her as she moved, each step closer a study in defiance. She stopped just out of his reach, her chin lifted in muted defiance, her posture unyielding despite the gravity of the moment.
Gift?
Sage's tone was icy, her words a blade that sliced through the illusion of his benevolence.
Or is it a chain, Pilates? A shackle to bind me to your side as your pet? Your historian, trapped in a cage of eternity while you rewrite history to your liking?
Pilates's lips curled into a bitter smile, but the brief flicker of irritation in his eyes betrayed his frustration. Her words had struck a nerve, scraping against the delicate facade he presented.
You see chains where I offer freedom.
He murmured, though the lie dripped like venom from his tongue. Pilates's gaze lingered on her, his admiration for her spirit warring with the desire to break it.
Freedom to be what? Your puppet? Your mouthpiece?
She folded her arms over her breasts, as if to shield to her body. Her posture spoke volumes of her refusal to bend.
To document the slow decay of a world bled dry by your empire.
Pilates rose, his movements fluid but predatory, the space between them diminishing with each step.
The world changes every day, Sage.
He said softly, his voice a dark promise.
And even we change with it.
His eyes gleamed with something ancient and dangerous, a flicker of vulnerability buried beneath layers of arrogance.
But together.
His voice dropped lower, seductive and insidious.
Ours could be the last empire, one that outlasts the rise and fall of every nation.
An empire built on fear and blood, feeding on your kin.
Sage's eyes flashed with fury, her words a searing accusation.
That's not living, Pilates. That's existence. And it's hollow.
For a moment, the air thickened and the space between them became a battlefield where neither would yield. The tension coiled tighter, the pulse of it reverberating through the chamber like a heartbeat. Pilates stepped closer, and Sage instinctively took a step back, her body braced for what might come. But he was relentless, closing the gap with a predator's grace. The exchange left Pilates momentarily without words, his thoughts swirling like the incense smoke that curled up towards the vaulted ceiling. He stepped closer, the space between them charged with the energy of their confrontation.
You know, Sage, we vampires don't need humans.
She took another step away from him.
Of course you do. You need us so you can live. To drink our blood. To make more vampires.
He stepped toward her, closing the distance between them once more.
We can take the nutrient we need through the blood of any mammal. Human beings are singularly unnecessary in obtaining this nutrient, as we can get it from anywhere.
Liar, if we weren't necessary, you would have wiped us out years ago,
she told him, stepping toward him in her fury, all traces of fear gone as her green eyes snapped in anger.
We don't need humans, but that doesn't mean that we don't find humans fascinating. It doesn't mean that we don't lust for them, either sexually or to feed upon, because we do not need humans to live. That doesn't mean that we don't enjoy their company, or even the way they think. Their lives are very short, and because of that, they live with such gusto. That makes them fascinating. And we...
His hand hovered near her face, his fingers brushing the air as if tempted to close the distance.
We were all human once.
Sage stood her ground, her pulse pounding in her ears, but her resolve did not waver.
And that's the tragedy,
she said softly, her words like a curse that echoed through the silence.
You forgot what it means to be human.
The heat of her defiance seared him. For a moment, Pilatus's mask slipped, and something raw flickered in his dark gaze. Admiration, desire, rage. Sage didn't flinch, her rejection clear as she met his gaze.
I'd rather embrace death than be part of your undead dynasty.
Pilatus's jaw clenched, the muscles in his face tightening with barely restrained fury. His hand fell to his side, his fingers curling into a fist as the weight of her rejection settled like lead in his chest.
Such a waste,
he murmured, but his tone was colder now, a promise of retribution. With a flick of his wrist, Victor emerged from the shadows, his presence brought by a silent command.
Escort her back,
Pilatus said, his voice devoid of warmth.
We'll continue this conversation another time.
As Sage was led away, her absence left a void that echoed through the chamber, but her defiance lingered like a ghost, haunting Pilatus in the hollow stillness. Alone once more, he turned back to the shadows, but his mind remained ensnared by her. His obsession had deepened, thickening like a poison in his veins. The game he played was a long one, after all. For him, time meant nothing, and in the end, she would be his. Later that evening, Pilatus summoned Sage to his private quarters once more, a ritual that had become as predictable as the moon's rise. The opulent chamber was bathed in the glow of candlelight. Its gilded edges and velvet drapes a stark contrast to the shadow that had taken root within its master. She'd refused to eat again. Pilatus glanced at the untouched plate, his attention consumed by her words from earlier, words that refused to dissipate, clinging to the edges of his consciousness like a persistent ghost.
Unrest in a populace is a poison, Pilatus.
Her voice echoed in his mind, a whispered refrain that gnawed at the edges of his composure.
It seeps through the ranks, even among the immortal. They whisper, you know, about your choices, about your leadership.
Pilatus stood at the towering window that overlooked the sprawling city below, the flickering lights of the human quarters resembling dying stars in a sky that had forgotten how to dream. His reflection was almost invisible in the glass, a faint distortion, a shadow of what once was. The city had been remade in his image, yet her words echoed through its streets, threading doubt through the very fabric of his empire.
Even empires crumble, Pilatus, and time erodes all certainties.
A muscle twitched in his jaw, the only outward sign of the turmoil that simmered beneath his polished exterior. He had lived through the fall of Rome, watched kingdoms rot from within, crumbled by whispers and doubt. The seeds of insurrection were always sown in silence, long before the first sword was drawn. And now, those seeds had been planted by her, by Sage. His grip tightened on the goblet in his hand, the cool metal bending slightly beneath his strength. Blood-spiced wine, aged to perfection, painted a crimson line down the side of the goblet, trailing like a wound. He brought it to his lips, the taste of iron mingling with the bitterness of unspoken fears. "Destiny is not swayed by whispers, my sage," he had told her, his voice steady, but the words felt hollow now, echoing in the vast emptiness of the chamber. "It is carved by those strong enough to wield power and make the difficult choices." Yet her gaze had been unwavering, a mirror reflecting his deepest anxieties back at him. She hadn't needed to speak. Her silence had screamed louder than any accusation, her arched brow and tilted head a subtle, devastating challenge. And he had felt it. A break, small but present. For the first time in centuries, doubt whispered in his ear, and it spoke with her voice. Pilatus inhaled, savoring the cool night air that seeped through the cracks of the ancient stone walls. The scent of rain and decay intertwined, a reminder that even immortality was not immune to rot.
Immortality is both a gift and a burden.
He had confessed to her. A moment of vulnerability he now cursed.
An endless cycle of responsibilities, a constant battle against the sweeping storms of change. I fight to protect the people and the empire through a slow and stable transition through time.
But she had seen through him. Beneath the constructed facade of indomitable power, she had sensed the fatigue, the weight of an eternity spent preserving an empire that refused to remain silent.
Even empires crumble, Pilatus.
Her soft words had been a dagger to his heart.
And time erodes all certainties.
Pilatus's eyes darkened as they traced the city's skyline. His empire would not crumble. He would not allow it.
Perhaps.
He had murmured to her, his voice barely above a whisper. But in that moment, he had lied to her and to himself. Because he did not intend to rule until the stars burned out. He would outlast them. As Sage was escorted back to her cell, Pilatus remained rooted to the spot, his gaze locked onto the empty corridor displayed on the surveillance screen. Her defiance haunted him, lingering in the air like the scent of her skin, an intoxicating mixture of danger and allure.
Remarkable.
He whispered, his voice barely above the rustle of the drapes behind him. But this was no longer a game of power. Pilatus's obsession had evolved from admiration to possession to something darker. And if Sage believed she would remain beyond his reach forever, she was wrong. A wicked smile tugged at his lips, cold and full of sinister promise. The chains of immortality were already tightening around her, and soon Sage would feel them bite. Pilatus advanced with predatory grace, his footsteps silent on the cathedral's ancient stone floor. Each step echoed in Sage's mind, a phantom sound that pressed against her resolve. She remained steadfast, though the weight of the moment coiled around her like a tightening noose. Her spine was a rod of steel against the ornate chair he had offered, a throne carved from bone-white marble, smaller than his own, but no less oppressive. A mockery of power. The chair wasn't a gift. It was a gilded cage. The air between them grew heavy, thick with unspoken desires and the suffocating weight of unrelenting control. Shadows stretched from the towering pillars, slithering toward her feet as if they, too, sought to ensnare her.
Consider it my gift to you.
Pilatus murmured, his voice a velvet rumble that resonated through the oppressive silence. His words were a caress, laced with poison.
A chair fit for an empress. An empress who can guide the people to a better future. One who can witness the unfolding of history for eternity.
His eyes, hungry and red like pools of endless blood, drank her in as though he could already see her seated beside him, immortal and bound to his empire. But Sage met his gaze without flinching, her defiance a spark in the shadowed chamber.
A gift?
Her lips curled into a smile, but it was a cold, dead thing, devoid of warmth.
Chains, by another name.
Her voice, though muted, echoed like a bell, tolling in the vast chamber.
An empress is not free, Pilatus. She's shackled to an empire, shackled to an emperor, bound by duty, by expectation, by your will.
Her words lashed out, but Pilatus did not recoil. Instead, his eyes gleamed with something darker, more primal. His admiration for her defiance was a sickness, a festering hunger that grew with every rejection. He leaned in, closing the distance between them, the chill of his presence brushing against her skin like ice. Mere inches separated them, yet it felt as though an abyss stretched between their souls. The scent of him, ancient, intoxicating, and laced with the coppery tang of blood, filled her senses, an oppressive, stomach-turning reminder of what he was.
You could be eternal, powerful.
He murmured, his tone seductive, almost reverent. His voice echoed off the cathedral walls, the sound wrapping around her like the devil's incantation.
Imagine it, my sage. Time bending to your will. Empires rising and falling beneath your gaze. No sickness, no death, only power. Everlasting.
The temptation slithered through his words like a serpent in the garden, But Sage's resolve was a fortress built on the ashes of her suffering. Her jaw tightened, her green eyes hard as emeralds.
I choose mortality,
She hissed, her rejection crystalline and sharp enough to cut through the air between them.
Life is precious because it ends, Pilatus. I won't trade my soul for your cursed immortality.
Her words were a death knell, echoing off the stone walls, and for a fleeting moment, Sage saw something, a flicker in Pilatus's gaze. Respect. It vanished as swiftly as it materialized, the void consuming all vestiges of his humanity. He masked it with practiced indifference, but Sage had seen the crack in his facade, a tiny fissure, but a weakness nonetheless.
Very well,
He murmured, though the chill in his voice belied the calm of his words.
we will try again. Another day.
The promise in his tone was not an idle one. It was a vow, a sinister oath that reverberated through the air like a distant drum of war. His eyes lingered on her for a moment too long, as if he were memorizing the contours of her defiance, savoring it before it crumbled.
Your mood.
He added, his lips curling into a dangerous smirk.
Would improve if you ate something, my sage.
The possessive emphasis on the word my sent a chill down her spine, but Sage refused to let him see her falter. Her silence was her weapon, a shield that Pilatus could not penetrate. Yet, as he straightened, withdrawing like a predator biding its time, the tension in the room did not dissipate. It thickened, swirling around Sage like a shroud of invisible chains. She felt them tightening, linking her to him, to this empire built on blood and deceit. But chains could be broken, and Pilatus would learn that her spirit was forged from something far stronger than steel. Pilatus watched as Victor led her away, his expression unreadable, but inside a storm raged. The game was far from over, and he reminded himself that he had all the time in the world to play it. Victor's grip was unyielding, his hand a cold vice on Sage's shoulder as he guided her through the shadowed corridors of the cathedral. The ancient stones pressed in around her, their silence heavier than words, as if the walls themselves whispered secrets of power and betrayal. Each step echoed off the vaulted ceiling, a ghostly reminder of her entrapment. The weight of her exchange with Pilatus still hung heavy on her mind. Every word, every glance had been a move in their deadly game, a game where the stakes were far higher than she was prepared to admit. She had seen the glint of obsession in his eyes, felt the heat of his desire cloaked beneath promises of power and eternity. But obsession was a double-edged sword. If she played it right, she could twist his fixation into a weapon, a dagger aimed straight at the heart of his empire. Pilatus's obsession with her revealed a weakness, a flaw in his otherwise impenetrable armor. Yet as Victor led her deeper into the bowels of the cathedral, doubt slithered through her thoughts, coiling around her resolve like a serpent.
What if I'm wrong?
The door to her cell groaned as it swung open, the sound scraping against her nerves. As it clanged shut behind her, the finality echoed in her chest, sealing her within the suffocating confines of stone and shadow. Sage pressed her palm to the cool wall, feeling the faint vibrations pulsing through the stone. The cathedral breathed, an ancient, living thing that bore witness to the unholy acts committed within its heart. It felt aware, watching, waiting. Her mind spun, tracing the web of Pilatus's manipulations. His desires were not straightforward. His obsession with her was tangled, layered with contradictions that made it impossible to discern where control ended and genuine fascination began. He offered her a throne, but she recognized it as a gilded cage.
But why?
A shiver ran down her spine as a chilling realization seeped into her bones. Pilatus wasn't offering her power out of love, nor even lust. His interest in her was darker, more twisted, a game of domination where even Sage couldn't tell if she was the predator or the prey.
What if he knows?
The unsettling thought gnawed at her mind. What if Pilatus had already seen through her facade, already expected her attempt to manipulate him? What if his obsession wasn't a weakness, but a trap designed to ensnare her? Sage's heart pounded in her chest, her breath hitching as the walls seemed to close in.
I have to be sure.
Because if Pilatus was 3 steps ahead, she wasn't the hunter. She was the prize. And in this game, losing meant more than death. It meant eternity in his grasp.
This story is still unfolding, so subscribe and follow the pulse of the night. New chapters rise soon, and those who are bound to this channel will hear them the moment they awaken.